Hey everyone, David with Our Week in Homestead. Well, spring is in full bloom here out at the ranch, and it's time for us to get started with our honeybees. We thought we'd take some time to show you guys how to get involved in honeybees if you wanted to start beekeeping, and we'd show you some of the basic equipment and what it takes to get started. A lot of people ask us, how much work is it to be a beekeeper? Well, if you have a hive or two, I would say it's a little more work than a cat, but a lot less work than a dog. So stick around and we'll show you how to get started. So at the heart of every hive is the bottom board. We up here use screen bottom boards because we're in a warmer climate. If you also notice, there's a grid in the bottom of our board. This specific board allows you to manage how many pests are in your hive. Periodically what we do is we clean this sheet off and we spray it with PAM, and then we slide the sheet in, and we can monitor over a period of time when the bugs and debris are dropped onto the board. We can then go back and count and have an idea of how many pests are in our hive. The next component is the hive body. Hive bodies come in 3 different sizes. They come in a shallow, into a normal, and then a deep. We use deep hive bodies, and what goes along with the hive bodies are the frames. This is the actual medium or the area that your bees will make their hives and store their honey. You want to make sure that whatever height of body that you buy the frames with the same height also. After you get your hive bodies in on the bottom, this is the area where they're going to lay their eggs and raise their brood. A lot of people will use 2 of these boxes. When you're ready to put your honey super on top, which is a box that's just used for honey, we put what's called a queen excluder. The queen excluder has holes in here that allow the worker bees to go in between the honey supers and the hive bodies, but the holes are small enough that the queen can't transfer up there in order to lay her eggs. After that, we put our honey super on top, and so you'll have honey, eggs, and brood down below, and on top in your honey super you'll have just honey. The next component is the top board. The top board lays flat on top of your hive at whatever configuration you have it set up with, whether it has a honey super or just a hive body. And you want to pay close attention to the doorway that's on top. Bees can travel out of here, get up here to cool themselves, and then they can leave the hive through the top. When you put your lid on, you want to pay special attention to slide that lid forward so that you leave a gap underneath here so the bees can come and go through the top. Now later in the season, we have what's called robbing, and that's where neighboring bees from other colonies, there's no more pollen, so they're all trying to grab what they can take before winter gets there, so they start robbing each other. So what you do is you slide that lid back, and you're now closing this entrance that's on the top, and then that'll help the bees in the hive help protect the resources that they have. One of the last things I wanted to cover is I wanted to talk about feeders. This is one of the more common feeders that beekeepers use. There's a lot of different feeders, and you're going to have to do some research to find out what works best for you, but the most common one are these jar feeders. It basically consists of a block that's milled or machined out so that it receives this jar that has a lid that's perforated. So we slide that inside there, we go off to one side, lift it and set it underneath the hive, and then we take one of our reducers and we cut it down. And if you notice, I'm using the small door, the small opening. Anytime you're feeding, having that syrup inside the hive encourages robbing. So whenever you're feeding your bees, you're going to want to reduce the door to the hive so that way they can defend the hive against robbers. Next up is the safety gear. Most beekeepers usually run in some type of veil and gloves. When it comes to a veil, I prefer the jacket type. It's super simple to just put the jacket on and zip it up and then throw the veil over your head. I also personally prefer the hat type. It tends to keep the mesh and all the netting away from my face, and I really enjoy that. The other thing with the gloves are typically made with leather, soft leather on the hands, and then they have a wrist that goes all the way up so that when you put your jacket on, it rides up a lot higher and closes up any gaps or opportunities for bees to get inside your jacket. Most beekeepers, professional beekeepers, they're seasoned. So I've seen people out there in shorts and they just have a veil around their face and neck. It just depends on what you're comfortable with. The other thing is I prefer to wear baggy pants. If you wear tight pants like exercise pants, bees can go onto the pants and sting the pants, and because your skin's right next to the material, the stinger can go through. So it just depends on what you're comfortable with, and you'll find the gear that works best for you. Again, baggy pants, full gloves, and a full jacket is good for the beginner beekeeper because you just are as safe as you can be from getting stung. Now we're going to talk about the tools. Basically, there's 3 tools that a beekeeper uses. When you go on and start looking online for parts and pieces for beekeeping, there's lots of stuff. But the most basic stuff is going to be your smoker, a bee brush, and a hive tool. The hive tool is really nice because when you're getting in there cleaning hives and pulling out frames, the bees they have a tendency to do what they want to. So what you're going to find is when you start opening the hives, they'll have taken wax and propolis and they'll have glued that whole thing together. So when you open the hive, you can get in there and gently start prying the frames apart and scraping off the excess wax and propolis that they got onto the frames. So this is probably the most versatile tool you're going to have. Before you open the hive, you're going to want to give them some smoke. So the smoker basically opens up and it puts a little bit of smoking fuel. I have a bag of it set right here. Just depends on what type there is. I've seen people use burlap. I've seen them use pine needles. Just depends on what you're most comfortable with. And once you get this lit, you keep puffing it and smoke comes out. What you want to do is go to the hive, go to the entrances, crack the lid, start giving them some smoke. And what it does is it blocks their pheromone signal so they can't say, hey, danger, danger. And some of them start to panic and say, man, something's going on. So they start gorging themselves with honey and wax because they think they're going to have to leave. So what it does is it just makes them more manageable. I find that if you've got a hive that's, we'll call it an angry hive, and their temperament is elevated, you can give them more smoke and give it a chance to kind of settle in, and it's a lot easier to work that hive. The last thing is the bee brush, and it's just that. As you're cleaning frames, it gently will knock bees off of the frames or lids or whatever it is you're trying to do. You find when you start closing a hive, bees will start climbing where you're trying to put a lid. You don't want to smash them. So a lot of times you can brush the majority of them away before you put the lid on. So these are your 3 most basic tools that you're going to use when you're a beginner beekeeper. I think when it comes to buying supplies, if you're just getting started and you want to try a simple kit, Tractor Supply has pretty much everything you need to get started. Their small backyard beekeeping kit has everything you need for the lower hive, including a smoker, a hive tool, and a bee brush. The next thing you'll need to get is a honey super, and they have that as well. They also carry a beekeeping jacket as well as beekeeping gloves. If you're planning on having a lot of hives, having it in close proximity to a vehicle is helpful. That way when you're moving a lot of equipment in and out, you can use the car to help you transport the equipment back and forth from the yard to wherever you store your equipment. I hope this introduction to the bees, the beehives, and everything that it takes to get into bees has been helpful. If you enjoyed the video, please give us a thumbs up. We're going to do some other videos like installing the nukes that we did here in our own bee yard, as well as some other things around our ranch. So be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We would love to connect with you guys, so if you have any questions or comments, please put them down in the comment section below. I'll also put a list of some of the parts you can use to build your own bee colony down in the description. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.